king of German mercenaries.
Chapter 290 Interference from all sides. Henry, Duke of Lüneburg, thought nothing of Marin's monetary demand, but Marin's request that the Duke of Saxony cede Friesland was a big deal. In the Middle Ages, it was not uncommon for nobles to be captured. Moreover, it was normal to ask for ransom. However, it was rare to ask for the cession of land. Because the nobility was noble because of the land. Without land, or with less land, how could they be noble? Of course, it is not that there has been no cession of land. However, that half of it happened when the strong confronted the strong. The nobles in the Middle Ages valued order the most. As a new noble, Marin asked the Duchy of Saxony to cede such a large piece of land right away, which made Henry, Duke of Lüneburg, feel uncomfortable instinctively. Because the Duchy of Lüneburg is not far from the county of East Frisia, with only the bishopric of Munster or the county of Oldenburg in between. If Marin annexed Frisia this time, and then the bishopric of Munster or the county of Oldenburg next time, then he might annex Lüneburg next time. Therefore, Duke Henry of Lüneburg was not feeling well. Then, Duke Henry returned to Lüneburg on the pretext that he could not make the decision, and told the waiting Duke of Saxony the news, and suggested that the Duke of Saxony unite with other nobles to put pressure on Marin. The purpose of the pressure was not to not pay the money, but to make Marin give up the idea of seizing West Frisia. The combat effectiveness of Marin's army was already obvious. A powerful country like the Duchy of Saxony could not defeat him. If Marin was given an opportunity to expand, perhaps the next expansionist madman would appear. Saxony couldn't suppress Marin, and neither could Lüneburg. So the Duke of Saxony began to send his men to ask for help from his nephew, the Elector of Saxony, and the other 6 electors. The Duke of Saxony even went to Innsbruck in person to ask for help from Emperor Maximilian I, who had returned to Austria, hoping that the emperor would come forward to make peace. Around the new year, the 7 electors of the Holy Roman Empire successively received requests for help from the Duke of Saxony. Except for King Ladislaus II of Bohemia, who expressed no interest, the other 6 electors expressed vigilance against Marin's expansionist tendencies. Most importantly, Marin was ostensibly an important thug under Emperor Maximilian I. Therefore, they were unwilling to see Marin have more territory. Therefore, the other 6 electors, except the King of Bohemia, all demanded that Marin give up his territorial claims to West Frisia in the name of mediation. However, out of a dark desire, the other 5 electors, except the Elector of Saxony, had no objection to Marin's ransom request. Based on the principle that Marin could not demand the cession of West Frisia, Marin and the Duke of Saxony began negotiations in Papenburg, a city in the north of the bishopric of Munster close to the county of East Frisia, witnessed by the representatives of the 6 electors. Marin was extremely depressed about this. Originally, he had planned to completely take over West Frisia. However, the 6 electors put pressure on him all of a sudden, forcing him to accept their advice in a humiliating way. The reason is simple. If it was one of the 6 electors, Marin would not be afraid. Now, after defeating the 24,000 troops of the Duchy of Saxony, Marin is in the limelight, and the morale of his soldiers is particularly strong, as if he has gained confidence. At this time, Marin is not afraid to confront any principality head-on, even the elector. However, when the 6 electors united, Marin had to back down. As a newly rising noble, Marin did not want rapid expansion at this stage, but urgently needed to be recognized by all parties. After all, he rose too quickly and his foundation was not solid. Moreover, newcomers are prone to joint suppression by old forces. This applies not only to the hegemony of princes, but also to the workplace in later generations. Some new employees who emerged too quickly are also prone to joint resistance and suppression by old employees. By the same token, Marin, a new employee in the aristocratic world, rose too fast, and it was inevitable that he would be hostile and jealous of those old aristocratic forces. In desperation, Marin decided to keep a low profile and lay a solid foundation first. You know, any elector can gather an army of 20,000. It is not difficult for the 6 electors to gather an army of more than 100,000. This number of people has exceeded the total population of East Frisia. No matter how powerful Marin is, he dare not say that he can fight against an army of more than 100,000 with 10,000 people. Unless all his men use advanced weapons that are hundreds of years ahead of this era. But for now, the army under Marin can only be said to be one step ahead of the times. It is not a problem for 10,000 people to fight against 20,000 or 30,000. If you want to fight against more than 100,000 people, don't dream about it. Therefore, Marin decisively gave up the territorial claim and began to bargain with the Saxons in other aspects. The representatives of the other 5 electors, except the Elector of Saxony, were very supportive of Marin's other requests. Because the electors were not so harmonious. If the 7 electors were so united, the Habsburg family might have been killed by them. There were also many dirty things among the electors. For example, the Saxony business circle was the second largest business circle in the Hanseatic League, and the Elector and Duke of Saxony benefited greatly from it. Their respective financial incomes far exceeded those of other electors, which inevitably aroused the jealousy of other electors. Therefore, they also openly and secretly encouraged Marin to weaken the Duke of Saxony. Anyway, as long as Marin did not think about expansion, they were still willing to support Marin to bite off a large piece of meat from the Duchy of Saxony. After all, Marin's East Frisia, plus the Wadden Islands, is only about 3,000 square kilometers, just a county. European counties are generally 2,000 to 3,000 square kilometers in size, and it is difficult to become powerful. In fact, the 5 electors were very happy about the failure of the Duke of Saxony's expansion. Therefore, as long as Marin did not touch the red line of territory, the representatives of the other 5 electors expressed their support. Although the Duke of Saxony was dissatisfied with the ransom price of Prince George and the knights, he still accepted it. You know, among the 1,980 knights captured by Marin, 1,200 of them were borrowed from the Elector of Saxony. Needless to say, he had to redeem these people. Then, the two sides began to bargain fiercely over the ransom of the regular infantry. In fact, Marin's asking price of 50 gold coins per infantryman was not high. However, the number of Saxon prisoners this time was too large, which was beyond the Duke of Saxony's ability to bear. Because, if Marin's asking price is met, the Duchy of Saxony can't raise that much money even if it sells everything it has. After all, that's 1.64 million gold coins. The annual fiscal revenue of the Duchy of Saxony is only about 300,000 gold coins. Moreover, this money is not saved, but more than half is spent. The remaining amount each year is at most tens of thousands of gold coins. At present, the Duchy of Saxony can only take out 500,000 or 600,000 gold coins at most. Most of the rest can't even be taken out. Marin thought about it and realized that the Duchy of Saxony really couldn't afford that much money. However, Marin didn't want to suffer a loss. In the end, Marin proposed a plan of population for gold coins. Marin proposed that since the Saxons could not afford so much money, they could use population to replace the money. For example, Marin planned to turn the 8,000 conscripted soldiers and 10,000 civilians captured by the Saxons into his own serfs. Of course, it is not enough to just have men. These young and strong people are good laborers, but men alone cannot have children. This is not good for the future population growth of East Frisia. Therefore, Marin asked the Duke of Saxony to send all the families of these 18,000 young and middle-aged people to East Frisia. In exchange, Marin was willing to exempt Saxony from paying a compensation of 500,000 gold coins. Anyway, the Saxons couldn't afford to pay that much money. Although Duke Albrecht of Saxony was not happy to lose so many men, he could not afford so much money. Therefore, after careful consideration, he accepted Marin's plan of population for gold coins. However, the two sides had a big disagreement on the amount of gold coins to be used for population. According to Marin's plan, the Duke of Saxony had to pay a huge ransom of 1.14 million golden gold coins in addition to sending the 18,000 young and strong family members to East Frisia. The Duke of Saxony felt that it was still too high. You know, there were only more than 500,000 gold coins in his treasury. He was not the king of France. Even if he was rich, he was just a duke of a principality. Therefore, being able to take out more than 500,000 gold coins was already the limit. If it was more, the Duke of Saxony would have to borrow money. However, it is not so easy to repay loans. In recent years, the annual interest rate of loans given to nobles is as high as 10% to 15%. If a loan of 1 million gold coins is borrowed, the annual interest alone is as high as 100,000 to 150,000 gold coins. This is almost half of Saxony's annual income. If so much money is borrowed, the Duchy of Saxony may go bankrupt. Therefore, Duke Albrecht of Saxony must have hoped that the more gold coins the able-bodied men could use to compensate for the loss, the better. As for population, the Duchy of Saxony, as one of the most prosperous principalities in Germany, was not short of it. At present, the Duchy of Saxony had a population of more than 800,000 people, plus more than 200,000 people in West Frisia, which made the population over 1 million. Therefore, the loss of tens of thousands of people was still bearable. Moreover, the population in the Duchy of Saxony was too large because of the long-term peace. After all, the grain production in this era was there. During a break in the negotiations, Duke Albrecht of Saxony humbled himself and begged the representatives of the other 5 electors for help. The representatives of the several electors were actually very conflicted at this time. On the one hand, they were happy to see the Duke of Saxony make a fool of himself. On the other hand, they didn't want Marin, Maximilian I's running dog, to be too proud. In the end, they chose the Duke of La Saxony. Then, with the help of several representatives of the electors, the Duke of Saxony finally won a discount. He only had to send the families of the 18,000 civilians, and the cash payment was reduced from 1.14 million to 1 million. The Duke of Saxony could afford the loan of 500,000 gold coins. However, the Duchy of Saxony would be in debt for many years, but it would not go bankrupt. After all, the prosperity of the Duchy of Saxony's business was there. In fact, the other electors were also happy to see Marin laugh, because the 18,000 men, including their families, totaled about 50,000 to 60,000 people. 50 or 60,000 people means the same number of mouths to feed. The influx of these people into the East Frisian county alone consumes an astronomical amount of food. Even if Marin gets 1 million gold coins, it is estimated that most of it will be spent on feeding those immigrants. Moreover, the several electors also had a lot of intelligence about the county of East Frisia. They all agreed that East Frisia could not support so many people. Because there were too many swamps in East Frisia, and the land suitable for farming could not support so many people. In the end, these people might even bring down the county of East Frisia, which was what they were happy to see. However, what they didn't know was that Marin, who had mastered advanced agricultural technology, could feed tens of thousands more people. You know, during the autumn harvest, Marin sold the grain he had purchased from other nobles, and basically didn't move his own grain. The reason he didn't move it was to wait for the consumption of immigrants. That was a total output of 500 million pounds of rye, enough for hundreds of thousands of people to eat for a year. Unexpectedly, before he started to immigrate, the Duke of Saxony eagerly sent 18,000 strong men, and was also responsible for sending their families. Now, Marin doesn't have to worry about the problem of immigration. When signing the final treaty, Marin suddenly thought of something and made a special request. For those young men without wives, the Duke of Saxony must be responsible for sending an extra young female serf to marry those young men. After all, if there are thousands of bachelors among the 18,000 young men, it will be very difficult to find wives for them. Therefore, Marin directly pushed this matter to the Duke of Saxony. Even many of Marin's soldiers are still bachelors. The wretched Marin directly asked the Duke of Saxony to help him solve this matter together, who said Saxony has a large population. Moreover, Marin also pointed out that young virgins must be present, otherwise he would refuse to accept the goods. This is also to prevent the Duke of Saxony from using infertile old women to make up the numbers. Finally, Marin also threatened that if you don't send enough women, your son will not be allowed to return and will spend the rest of his life in prison under my command. Chapter 291 Spice Diplomacy. Marin was actually very frustrated during this negotiation. He had already occupied West Frisia, but under the interference of several major powers, he had to give it up. However, Marin would not spit it out in vain. Groningen had been looted by him, and Leeuwarden had no time to take it for the time being. However, Marin still sent people to the beach. Originally, Marin sent people to the seaside just to manage those West Frisian fishermen in advance and recruit some young and strong men from them to enrich his sailing team. However, after the negotiation results came out, Marin immediately changed his approach and sent people to notify his men at the seaside to forcibly relocate those fishermen to East Frisia. This time, Marin planned to relocate 10,000 to 20,000 West Frisian fishermen to East Frisia. Anyway, West Frisia has a total population of more than 200,000, so a reduction of 10,000 or 20,000 is not a big deal. Moreover, before the Duke of Saxony paid the ransom and population, Marin decided to stay in Groningen and only return Leeuwarden first. In fact, in the southwestern part, after the news of the Duke of Saxony's defeat spread, the original 9 nobles of West Frisia had already led their army to attack. Now, West Frisia was in a period of military vacuum. Before the Duke of Saxony redeemed the army, no one had the time to suppress the army of the original 9 nobles in West Frisia. Even those nobles naively found Marin and wanted to take over the entire Frisia. Of course Marin was not happy. If he returned it to the Duke of Saxony, he could get a ransom. If he handed it over to these 9 poor guys, he would get nothing. However, he hinted to those 9 idiots that the western half of Friesland was in a period of military vacuum. Only the city of Leeuwarden had a Saxon garrison, and other areas were basically empty. So, these 9 stupid nobles, Paisiwag, and more than 1,000 people started the great cause of restoring the country. But Marin was not optimistic about them, because their army's combat effectiveness was just so. Although the hundreds of people Marin sent back had good combat effectiveness. However, the Frisian soldiers who had been trained by Marin were all melee soldiers. Such an army would not be able to fight the Saxon infantry in a one-on-one duel. However, if the Saxons used plate knights to charge, they would be unable to resist. After all, Sivag only learned strict military discipline and training methods, but did not learn the Spanish phalanx, which was specialized in fighting against knights. Of course, even if Sivag had learned it, he could not afford it. The Spanish phalanx consumed too much gunpowder. Now that the 9 nobles had no source of funds, how could they afford guns and cannons? However, letting them mess around in western Frisia now would also make the Duke of Saxony anxious. Without an army, the Saxons would not be able to drive away the former Frisian army that was causing trouble. Therefore, in desperation, the Saxons must be eager to redeem their elite troops. In that way, Marin could get the ransom earlier. This peace talk taught Marin a profound lesson, that is, in Europe, allies are very important. There are many countries in Europe, and no country is too big or too strong. Even a strong country like France is just a fighter among small countries. Therefore, to survive in the European aristocratic circle, you must have enough and strong allies. To give 2 simple examples, France during the Napoleonic era was extremely powerful in Europe, its national strength far exceeded that of other countries, and it was able to mobilize hundreds of thousands of troops. However, Nadal was too ambitious and too confident, he chose to challenge all of Europe. The final result was that the arrogant Napoleon was eventually defeated by the powerful countries in Europe who formed a group to become the ultimate boss. Similarly, in the 19th century, Germany, under the leadership of the diplomatic master Bismarck, made friends with Tsarist Russia and Austria. After resolving its worries, it concentrated on beating France, achieved brilliant results, and established the German Empire. On the contrary, later William II and Hitler were too arrogant and chose to go to war with many European powers. Then, everyone knows the result, both of them were beaten to death. After thinking it over, Marin finally understood his weakness, that is, he had too few allies. Although Marin now has 2 allies, the Teutonic Knights and the Principality of Clever, as well as the temporary ally of the Principality of Guedes. However, the Principality of Guedes is unreliable, and Duke Charles is a very ambitious man. The Teutonic Knights are too far away and can't help much. As for the Principality of Clever, the relationship with Marin can't be said to be bad, but it's not that close either. It can only be said that the Principality of Clever can only be regarded as Marin's trade partner, not the level of an ally. In addition, Marin was naturally considered to be the emperor's man. Therefore, it was very important to have a good relationship with the emperor's faction. As for the surrounding countries, Saxony's Friesland was definitely Marin's enemy. As for Oldenburg in the east, because of the plot to seize Jever, it must be against Marin. Therefore, only the bishopric of Munster in the south and the archbishopric of Utrecht in the southwest were worthy of Marin's friendship. Moreover, under the current circumstances, the bishopric of Munster and the archbishopric of Utrecht will certainly not refuse to make friends with Marin after seeing his powerful military strength. But how to conduct diplomacy? Marin did not graduate from international relations, and he had not even studied international trade. So, he could only think of the answer himself. Suddenly, Marin remembered the famous ping-pong diplomacy of the later Taizu during the ice-breaking period. Then, Marin came up with a good idea. It just so happened that the 300,000 pounds of spices that Columbus had shipped back to Emden were still in the warehouse and there was no time to deal with them. Because Marin had been preparing for the war with Saxony for some time. Now, Marin has time to deal with the pile of spices. If Taizu could play ping-pong diplomacy, why can't I play spice diplomacy once? Marin thought. Moreover, unlike ping-pong diplomacy, spice diplomacy directly involves great interests and is more attractive than ping-pong diplomacy. After thinking it over, Marin sent envoys to visit Ghent, Cleveland, Munster, Utrecht and Königsberg to strengthen relations or establish friendly diplomatic relations with these countries. Of course, Marin also brought a large number of spice contracts to these 5 countries, allowing them to share some of the spice profits. Originally, Marin was going to share some of the benefits of spices with the emperor. However, Austria, where the emperor was far inland in the south, and communication was inconvenient. Therefore, Marin finally chose to take out 80,000 pounds of spices and give them to the emperor's heir, the handsome King Philip, to distribute. Although it was not directly handed over to the emperor, it was almost the same. Because the emperor only had one son, and it was also very convenient to transport the spices to the Netherlands. Then, Marin provided 50,000 pounds of wholesale volume to the Principality of Clifford and the Teutonic Knights respectively, so that Duke Clifford and Grand Master Philip could also make a fortune. Afterwards, Marin provided 25,000 pounds of spices to the Bishop of Munster and the Archbishop of Utrecht respectively, so that the 2 bishops could also make a profit from it. Finally, Marin remembered his ally, Duke Charles of Guedes, whom he did not trust. After thinking it over again and again, Marin gave him a share of 10,000 pounds of spices, allowing him to make a small profit. In fact, although Marin gave up some profits by doing this, it also accelerated the sales of spices. After all, Marin himself had no way to sell all 300,000 pounds of spices. However, these nobles were different. Their families or forces were deeply rooted and had their own powerful network of relationships and business networks. In addition, spices were also in short supply in Europe, so it was not difficult for them to sell them all. As for Marin himself, he only kept 60,000 pounds of spices and sold them directly in Emden. After all, the sale of spices could also attract many merchants and merchant ships to come to Emden to engage in business activities. This would help to improve Emden's commercial reputation and prosperity. For example, the reason why Antwerp in the Netherlands developed into a top commercial port in Europe in the original history was that Portuguese merchants chose to establish a spice wholesale market in Antwerp in 1500, attracting merchants from northwestern Europe to gather in Antwerp to do business. Then, Antwerp became one of the most prosperous commercial ports at that time. Marin also plans to follow this route in the future and strive to develop Emden into an important trading port in northwest Germany. In this way, Marin can also collect more commercial taxes and tariffs. After spreading a lot of spices, Marin really gained the favor and recognition of several countries. East Frisia and these countries have conducted cordial and friendly high-level visits and signed various friendly agreements. Then, these countries publicly issued official statements recognizing Marin's legal status as Count of East Frisia. Even the emperor, after learning that his son had gained huge benefits, also issued a second statement announcing that he publicly recognized Marin's legal status. This is just the beginning. Marin believes that, except for those countries that cannot be reconciled, as long as commercial means are used well, more and more countries will be friendly with East Frisia. At that time, if there are other countries that want to attack East Frisia, they will have to consider those little friends of the county of East Frisia. Chapter 292, Marin Phalanx. After the Battle of Lisle County, Marin's name became famous. Although Marin had defeated Charles VIII before, it was an ambush in the middle of the night. Therefore, not many people were willing to acknowledge Marin's military talent. The main reason was that this kind of treacherous method was looked down upon in the European Middle Ages, where the spirit of chivalry prevailed. Even the Duke of Saxony thought that Marin was only good at scheming and had no real strength, so he launched an attack. Marin also knew that his achievements would not be recognized, so he thought of using a head-on approach to defeat the Saxons and establish his own reputation. Sure enough, after Marin defeated the 20,000-strong Saxon army of 5,000 heavy cavalry in plate armor with 10,000 infantry outside the city of Leer in one day, his reputation skyrocketed. Now, no one doubted Marin's military talent. Even the Grand Master of the Teutonic Army, Philip, sent 20 trusted officers to East Frisia to learn military command skills. Prince Philip is also an ambitious man. Over the years, the Teutonic Knights have been bullied by Poland and Lithuania. As the Grand Master of the Teutonic Knights, how could Philip be willing to remain passive? In fact, Poland and Lithuania are both countries that rely on heavy cavalry as their main combat force. Especially Poland, which can gather 20,000 to 30,000 cavalry. Later, when Poland and Sweden went to war, Poland would easily dispatch 20,000 to 30,000 winged cavalry. Of course, winged cavalry has not yet become popular. Winged cavalry is actually plate armor heavy cavalry without plate armor pants, with some bird feathers on the back. Because of the repeated reduction in land and population, the Teutonic Knights no longer had enough knights to fight Poland head-on. Therefore, Grand Master Philip was very interested in Marin's ability to use infantry to completely defeat the Saxon plate armored heavy cavalry. Therefore, he sent 20 young officers to study in Marin's army. Even King Ferdinand II of Spain sent 10 officers to learn. The leader was the famous Spanish general Gonzalo de Córdoba. Marin suddenly felt very embarrassed, because the originator of the Spanish square that the Spaniards wanted to learn was actually Gonzalo de Córdoba. This made Marin feel like a fake Li Kuei meeting a real Li Kuei. What made Marin even more embarrassed was that those officers who came to study actually named the famous Spanish phalanx as the Marin Phalanx. Well, it's the Marin Phalanx who told the Spanish that they hadn't invented it yet. Marin shamelessly approved the name Marin Phalanx. Because he was embarrassed to face the master, Marin was very attentive and explained the Marin Square to Gonzalo de Córdoba in detail. As a result, the Spanish and Teutonic officers who came to learn benefited a lot. In fact, both Spain and the Teutonic Empire were countries that urgently needed tactics that could use infantry to defeat plate-armored heavy cavalry. Needless to say, the Teutonic Empire's number one enemy, Poland, was a heavy plate cavalry power. Spain also had a huge demand, because Spain's rival France was the number one heavy plate cavalry power in Europe, even stronger than Poland. Therefore, learning the Marin phalanx to restrain the opponent's heavy plate cavalry was a very realistic and urgent need. Marin was not shy about it, because he knew that Gonzalo de Córdoba had a similar idea, but he was still exploring it and had not yet put it into practice. He was going to figure it out anyway, so he might as well teach him. In this way, he could also get the title of the famous general's teacher. As for the Teutonic Knights, they are Marin's most important partner. Although Marin is on good terms with both the Teutonic Kingdom and the Principality of Clever, John, the Duke of Clever, as an old noble, is actually quite cunning and not sincere enough in his treatment of others. But Captain Philip is different. He has never thought about becoming a noble since he was a child, so his mind is not that complicated and he is relatively sincere to others. Moreover, he was supported by Marin to become the captain, and he has a very good relationship with Marin. This time, Marin promised to help Philip train 20 officers, and Philip was not stingy. Philip said that he was helping Marin find a group of young wandering knights who had just arrived in the Teutonic Kingdom, and sent them to Marin after a while to alleviate Marin's dilemma of lacking middle-level officers. Every year, some wandering knights with dreams come to the Teutonic Kingdom to seek refuge. This place is the holy land of knights in the minds of many German wandering knights. Therefore, Philip's selection of a group of wandering knights to send to Marin was conditional. Count Marin, after your explanation, I found a big problem. Your formation seems to have average attack power and is more suitable for defense. After studying, the experienced General Gonzalo de Córdoba put forward his own opinion. You are right, General Gonzalo. The strongest point of the Spanish, oh no. Marin phalanx is its defense. As long as the tunnels are well dug, they can charge forward to resist the knight's charge. In addition, we don't have to rely solely on digging pits. We can also build walls, temporarily constructing some simple walls to guard against cavalry charges. At the same time, temporary stone walls can also resist the enemy's shells and bullets to a certain extent. However, this requires sufficient stones in the local area. If it is in a plain area, there is no condition to build a stone wall, even the simplest one will not work, because there is no stone. As for attack power, the Marin phalanx is indeed lacking. In the future, I plan to recruit more light cavalry to make up for the lack of attack power. But if the light cavalry fights against the heavy cavalry, they will definitely lose. General, who told you to use light cavalry to fight against the enemy's heavy cavalry? Remember, my war philosophy is to use the Marin phalanx to thwart the attack of the enemy's plate-armored heavy cavalry. As for the light cavalry, its main task is to deal with the enemy's infantry. For example, in the Battle of Lisle County, the Saxons used infantry to carry wooden boards and soil to fill the pit. At this time, you can use light cavalry to attack the enemy's infantry from the flank. If the light cavalry cannot defeat the heavy cavalry in plate armor, can't they bully the infantry who are like cannon fodder? Thank you for your advice. Count Marin, you are such a wise commander. Gonzalo de Córdoba said with admiration. He felt that the tactics designed by Marin were tailor-made for Spain. Because, although Spain did not have many heavy cavalry with plate armor, it still had a lot of light cavalry. Southern European countries, influenced by the Arabs, had more light cavalry. And the famous Spanish horse, the Andalusian horse, was not a heavy horse and was not suitable for heavy cavalry with plate armor, but was very suitable for light cavalry. In the 16th century, in order to enhance the protection of the cavalry, the Spaniards came up with the idea of removing the back half of the plate armor and retaining only the front part, in order to reduce the burden on the Andalusian horses. Of course, the Spaniards lacked plate armor heavy cavalry, but the Teutonic Knights had no shortage of them. Every year, wandering knights went to the Teutonic Kingdom for their dreams. The Teutonic officers who learned tactics from Marin were excited. For the Teutonic Kingdom, as long as the Marin phalanx was used to repel the group charge of the Polish plate armor heavy cavalry, the Teutonic plate armor heavy cavalry could take advantage of the low morale of the enemy and launch a counterattack. Therefore, the tactics designed by Marin were not only suitable for Spain, but also for the Teutonic Kingdom. After 1 month of study, 10 Spanish generals and 20 Teutonic officers took the Marin phalanx back to their respective countries. The Marin Square, they learned later, became a nightmare for the French and Poles. The European situation was greatly changed because of the emergence of the Marin Square. However, whenever people talk about the great Marin phalanx, Marin always feels embarrassed.